He was a deep humanitarian individual who truly cared about his own people. I would say that everything I have learned in my career, in my life, was taken from him. Moving to Abu Dhabi was an encounter with destiny.
Welcome to Autobiography, a series where we meet individuals who've made a significant impact on the UAE. And today's guest, His Excellency Zaki Nusseibeh. And we are very honored to have you with us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So tell me, Excellency, looking at the UAE today, how do you feel about the country?
A miracle has taken place in this part of the world.
A miracle.
A miracle. Over the last 50 years, dreams were realized that people thought were impossible to make a reality.
People thought were impossible, but not the leaders.
The leader from the outset had truly bold ambitions, a wide vision, long-term idea about where he wants to drive his country. But as the case with all exceptional leaders, leaders of history, leaders of destiny, it was not easy at first for others to understand where his vision comes from or where it will drive them to. And yet he was able to bring his people along with him, working with his fellow rulers of the Emirates and working with the young people that he focused on from the very outset, the young nationals that he wanted to be part of his development strategy for his country.
And you worked with him very closely.
I was blessed to be given this chance truly to be his interpreter on the one hand, and by being a media officer, his media officer, to be his voice as well to the outside world, and to be able to learn so much about those values that he held very dear to himself, and about his vision to where he wanted the country to come to.
You've described him as one of the greatest leaders humanity has known.
Because in everything he did, he was driven by his humane values. He was a political leader, of course. He was a charismatic leader, and he was a successful one. But above all, he was a deep humanitarian individual who truly cared about his own people and cared about all those people around him in this region and cared for humanity. So it's truly remarkable that in everything he did, he was value-driven and had a very strong moral compass that taught others to coalesce around him.
You know, meeting youngsters today, people that didn't get to meet him, they still speak of him as Baba Zayed. And you were fortunate to work closely with him. And really from day one, your experience in the UAE was alongside this person who you call a great leader. How has he shaped the person that you are today?
I would say that everything I have learned in my career, in my life, was taken from him. Because I came as a very young, in fact, graduate from England to Abu Dhabi in the 60s. And I started working for him from 1968.
What began as not a coincidence, but you were a journalist.
It was a coincidence. I mean, everything that happened to me here, and this is why I call my moving to Abu Dhabi was an encounter with destiny. Because everything I did was truly a coincidence, it's an accumulation, fortuitous coincidences that brought together where I am today.
And you said that you found your destiny in the UAE.
In the UAE. Because when I came to work in the Abu Dhabi initially, that was before the federation, as a result of what was happening in the Middle East, the war, the fact that Jerusalem was no longer was out of bounds, where my family lived, my parents, and I needed to earn a living by going somewhere. And it was the time that Abu Dhabi had just opened up, because Sheikh Zayed came to his position as ruler in '66, at the end of '66, and started developing his country. And so it became a magnet for many people from all over the world to come and work here. And it was an encounter with destiny, because I did meet him in the summer of '66, before he became ruler, by accident, when my father was ambassador of Jordan in London, and he invited him to dinner. I was still at Cambridge, but I came down to the dinner, met him, met some of his entourage, became friends with two of them, and had no idea at that time that my life will actually be involved with his destiny. And then I came to Abu Dhabi in '67, and to work in a company that was owned by family, but that work did not fascinate me, so I became by accident a kind of journalist, you know, a stringer, because there was only one hotel in town, and we met in that hotel. It was the only air-conditioned place where you could see everyone, and you could meet everybody, because Abu Dhabi was a small fishing village at the time. And there was a niche for a kind of stringer for the international and Arab press, because of the economic development that was going to take place here, but also because of the security situation in the Gulf, with the British government announcing its plans to withdraw its treaty relationship.
I mean, what was the mood like? This is pre-unification. This is in the '60s. The British say they're going to withdraw. Describe what life was like, and how do people feel with that news?
No, people were deeply concerned. The ruler of Sharjah, Sheikh Sultan, said it truly very expressively when he received the Sheikh Zayed Award some years back, when he said that all the responsible people were concerned, they were worried, they were afraid. Britain had taken on a mantle of only protecting the Emirates over 150 years, but it had not prepared them for the post-withdrawal period, because there was no army, there was no police force, there was no infrastructure.
It came as a surprise.
And it came as a surprise as well, because it was abrupt. It was a Labour government at the time who had economic difficulties with the collapse of the sterling pound, but also politically driven, wishing to withdraw east of Suez, but at the same time initially promising the rulers of the Emirates that they will retain their protective umbrella over the Emirates, and then coming back within 2 months, early '68, to tell them they will withdraw within 3 months, and they have to create their own political, social, and security structures. And therefore it was a tough time. It was a tough time. The whole region was conflict-ridden. There were issues with major neighbors about territory. There were issues happening in the Middle East. There was a confrontation east-west. This region was rich because Abu Dhabi had become rich in oil resources, but it was poor in everything else, including the most important one, human resources. There was no prior educational structure, few schools, haphazardly built over the years. And therefore, to have to take really very important decisions, Sheikh Zayed came through and said that we must create a federation. We must be together. It is in unity that we can find strength. And in unity not only amongst ourselves as Emirates, but also to establish a network of relationships and partnerships with the rest of the world, with our region and with the rest of the world. And this is what he set out to do. And this is what everybody who came to see him, I used to bring to him diplomats and journalists, were not convinced that it is doable, it's realizable. They would go back and say, but you know, he is dreaming. All that he says is a matter of wild dreams that cannot be realized. And yet Sheikh Zayed was confident that he had the will, that he had the vision, and that he had the ability to bring everyone together, and he did succeed. And this is why we live in the Emirates today in the way that you yourself have experienced it.
So when you arrived here as a young scholar in the 60s, and there's a very charismatic, visionary leader, without seeing the prosperity that we have today, what is it that you felt? What is it that you understood that maybe others at that time did not?
I was awe-stricken by seeing him and by hearing him give expression to his visions and to his ambitions and to this humanitarian drive that he had. I mean, the very first interview I had with him, and that was in 1968. I went to see him in the old fort, Al-Husn, which was the seat for the Al Nahyan ruling family for hundreds of years. And he was surrounded by people sitting in the courtyard outside under a tree. And he was a man who truly inspired awe in all those around him. You could see everybody's attention was focused on everything he said. And I went up to him, and yet he was able immediately to put me at ease. I mean, I was terrified initially. He was able to put me at ease. And then he's to start talking about this vision, what he wanted to do. A federation that will establish a wide network of partnerships and friendship based on tolerance and peace and cooperation, prosperity that he wished to bring not only to his own people, but to the people of the Gulf, as well as to the region around him, as well to the world at large, wherever he could. And then finally, the fact that we needed to modernize and rapidly to bring all the amenities that we did not have, education, health, communications, roads, electricity, water. But at the same time, as we take this unheard of journey into modernization, because it is going to be happening rapidly, we have to retain our value systems. We have to retain our national heritage. We have to retain our Emirati soul. And this was a vision truly to awe, to inspire, and to make you feel truly lucky to be part of such a vision. And this is why when I was asked to work for him, I immediately, as interpreter, I immediately said yes. Although, looking back at it now, how did I start it at such a young age? It would terrify me today if it was to be repeated again, because, I mean, he was a remarkable leader. His communication skills were unparalleled. His language was so rich and varied. And it was a difficult language. It was not easy because he talked in long paragraphs and not in boxed phraseologies. But he wanted to explain things. He wanted to bring anecdote, poetry, the prophetic traditions, the verses from the Quran, the poetry of the ancients, and to talk strategy and to talk politics and to talk diplomacy. And it's a mixture of languages. I mean, it was partly classical and partly Bedouin, but strong language. And you had to face all of this. You had to learn it rapidly. I had to develop my own shorthand because he would speak for 20 minutes sometimes before letting you translate. So it was awe-inspiring, but at the same time, it was an amazing and exhilarating experience, and it made me learn so much from his value systems, from his moral-driven leadership, from his commitment to serve. I mean, for him, the purpose of mankind was to help one another. And the purpose of any person who takes on responsibility was to serve others. All those kind of values that, in fact, he seeded into our governance system that we see around us today was something truly inspiring.
And you mentioned the Emirati culture as deeply rooted in Bedouin heritage, but at the same time having to adapt very quickly to modernization and just the world and the pace in which things are happening. So how has the UAE been able to mesh those two, holding on to the values, to the heritage, and yet moving so quickly to keep up and lead the modern world?
Because from the outset, Sheikh Zayed said that we must walk a parallel path. We must go into modernization, but we must retain our value systems. And we see this happening with every succession that took place. Only recently, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed said, we must keep our value systems. We must inculcate our children with these values. We must teach them in the primary schools, in kindergarten, in the universities. So there is this focus on the need to keep our value system, because this is how our society can really, truly live together and succeed and prosper. But also because the leadership, starting with Sheikh Zayed and his school of government, from the outset, actually was working in accordance with the qualities of leadership that I saw recently in Henry Kissinger's book about leaders, written at age 100, just last year, but where he said that the truly great leader is one who sees beyond what his society sees. He's able to push outer limits of what is doable. But and he works from the front. He is there in the forefront with people working with him, but he doesn't go too far ahead of his people. He makes sure that they follow with him along this path. He is set on transformational changes for his society. This is a truly transformational leader, who are the transformational leaders who are set on not only bringing in some administrative reforms or some small development, but truly changing the nature of the environment, social setup that we have, but at the same time, who make sure that this is done with his people so that they come along with him. They do not feel that they are left behind. And this is the kind of leadership that Sheikh Zayed had. This is the kind of leadership that today we have, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, with Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, with the young leaders that we have today. They know that they need to rapidly develop the country, but we must retain our value systems. This is what keeps us together.
And experiencing the days before unification, the days of unification, and then very, very rapid growth, was there a moment where you thought to yourself, wow, we, the UAE, we're now on the global stage? Was there an event?
You know, every year, I would say, there was something amazing, a wow thing happened. Initially, it was gloomy for others when they thought that it's pessimistic, but for us working around Sheikh Zayed, there was always confidence that it can be done. So the mere announcement of the federation was a wow day, but it did not lead immediately to a smooth transition to a strong federation. We had another decade of issues, of problems. Sheikh Zayed withdrew his candidacy for presidency in '76 because he said, there are too many disputes amongst us, and if it is because of me, I will not renew my presidency, but I will continue to serve the federation. And it went on until the late 70s when Sheikh Rashid became prime minister and then started working closely with Sheikh Zayed. It went into the 80s. So, but every time there was a wow moment when we said, we have done it. The unification of the armed forces in 76, that was a wow moment. Before that, there were separate headquarters. Gradually, as the federation succeeded, as it went forward, as it established those wide friendships and partnerships with the rest of the world, as it followed the policy of zero issues with our neighbors, with the world. We want a policy of peace, of progress. We will resolve all issues of dispute through negotiation. All of those were wow moments. And yet there were also moments when the Federation succeeded in being part of an international campaign, an effort in order to liberate Kuwait, for instance. And then it went on as a wow experience as suddenly the UAE became recognized worldwide
as a global player.
As a global player. And now, I mean, where we are today, every day is a wow day. I don't know anymore where to go. Mars, the probe to Venus. I don't know where else we are. We are moving into wow territories every day now, more or less.
One of the misconceptions, perhaps, when talking about the UAE and the Gulf in the West is the status and role of women. Your daughter, Her Excellency Zaki Nusseibeh, is the UAE's permanent representative to the UN. So I'm curious to know how you think the UAE has supported women and what have they done to empower women and support them in these leadership roles?
You know, first of all, the misconception that there is in the West, the stereotype of a woman as somebody who sits at home and does nothing, is totally devoid of any reality. Because women in the Gulf region, in Gulf societies, have always played a very important role. In the past, they always played an important role. If you look at the pearling days when the men went out on their boats months at a time every year, it was the women who ran society, who did everything at home. Women who actually played important roles even in politics, although it is not recognized. I know of leading women who did this in the past, and in fact, historical records say there was a time when a Bani Yas woman became the kind of tribal chief in the Liwa. I know of women today, for instance, Her Highness Sheikha Fatima bint Mubarak has been very active from the outset in working for the education of girls and women. Sheikh Zayed from the outset said that education should be, opportunities should be for both girls and boys. He paid parents a salary for every child they sent to school. He made education compulsory and free, at least until the secondary stage. And then it was free from then on for higher education.
So why do you think this misconception still exists?
Because of the Orientalist, if you like, mythology of women in the harem, women in the East, exotic and sensual, and some societies did have women in the harem, but Gulf countries never had the luxury of having their women not play an active role. Sheikh Zayed always said women are half of society. They are our mothers, our sisters, our daughters. How can we develop our country if we paralyze half of our society? So it's a myth rather than based on this Orientalist concept of the role of women in the East, the Orientalist tradition, the paintings that came to us in the 19th century, you know, the Ottoman harem, the Egyptian harem, the times of the Abbasid, the Umayyads. But women have always played an important role. You know, we as a family Jerusalem-based family, have our name come from a woman, Nusseibeh bint Ka'b, who actually accompanied the Prophet in his career and traveled with him and fought with him. Women fought. Women actually fought in the Islamic period and with the Jihad. They were not merely figureheads that sat in a harem. Also, I must say, perhaps jurists have over the years, as they do everywhere, in the Western tradition, in the Christian and Jewish tradition, as they do in the Muslim tradition, jurists who are mostly men always try to reduce the horizons for women and their rights. But I would say that in the Gulf specifically, women always played an important role.
Do you think in 50 years people won't be asking this question anymore?
I believe so, because they are running. And, you know, we have, how many ambassadors do we have who are women? How many ministers? People who go abroad, and they in the United Nations, I believe, 3 at least Gulf ambassadors are women. Saudi Arabia has sent a woman space astronaut. So we have here in the UAE jet fighter pilots who are women. We have officers who are women. We have police force. So this misconception that women somehow do not play any role in society is truly misconceived.
And on a personal note, I would be very happy not to have to ask the question about women or the status of women.
Well, I'm sure you stand for the kind of women that can always prove their mettle in any situation. You know, the majority of our graduates are women. Cabinet has 50% women in it.
Incredible.
National Assembly.
Incredible.
In fact, men are beginning to complain today and say, wow, what about us?
The UAE is a major tourist magnet. And I live in Dubai. I experience this every day, anytime I leave the house. What do you think makes the UAE so appealing to tourists and to expats who live here?
You know, this is also part of the miraculous adventure I told you about. Because what did Dubai, or for that matter, the Emirates, Abu Dhabi, the Emirates, what did they have to offer? The fact that there is sun 12 months a year, but it's very hot for 3 or 4 months. That there is sea and that there is sand. And we know that these are not elements sufficient to drive a strong tourist activity, economic activity.
Or maybe it is.
Not really, because I can think of many countries on the Mediterranean, I can think of countries elsewhere who are not able to do this. Because you require, it's a whole infrastructure that requires to be built, and over decades, not over a year or 2, where you provide everything that a tourist would want to come. Not only in terms of beaches and sun and sand. I mean, go to Saadiyat Island. From the outset, the master plan for Saadiyat was that it would have a very strong international cultural center, a quarter, cultural center that will have universal museums of the caliber of the Louvre and the Guggenheim, the National Museum, Maritime. From the outset, there was this overall comprehensive strategizing that we need to build an infrastructure based on many elements, not just sun and sand and beach.
So the infrastructure was there from very early on, when people were skeptical of why we would even need it.
Everybody said, who would ever come? You know, when I first started working here, people thought of this as a hardship area to come to. Diplomats, when they came here, were asked to go to a hardship country, so that they were given special privileges in order to come out here. Now they all compete in order to come out here.
And today, with these numbers still increasing, there is more need for futuristic transportation. There is need for more renewable and sustainable options. So is that something that you see the country and the leadership constantly planning ahead for?
I believe they are focused on making sure that this sustainable development can be implemented by, for instance, introducing public transport. We saw the metro in Dubai when it first started. Everybody laughed. They said, who's going to use a metro in Dubai? Now millions, I'm not sure how many, 15 million passengers go on these metros every day, every week, every month. Etihad Railway, that is also crisscrossing the country. Eventually, every urban center is working towards having its own walkable, if you like, neighborhood that is based on sustainable goals in the Emirates.
And what are your predictions for the UAE's economic agenda, which is, it's a broad and very ambitious one? How do you see it?
You know, you have seen the 2071 strategy to make the Emirates the number one in education, in health, in good governance, in making your society a happy society. The goals that were set up, maintaining the federation, driving a strong and robust and dynamic economy, but also having the technical means to do this, education, technical, artificial intelligence, the tools that are required to make this happen. And then the general moral system that we need to work within, tolerance and peace and working for bringing people together, resolving issues through negotiation, being open to humanity, helping others, cooperating with them. All of those goals, I can see them happen. I mean, today, like they did when the UAE started talking about a Mars probe, and they said, how can it be done? Today we have space engineers, UAE space engineers who work on this in the UAEU, the university. We have a space center where young Emirati students, engineers, men and women work together in order to develop a satellite program. This is truly an amazing presence that we live, that is going to lead to a truly, truly amazing future, especially because not only do we have our own young people who have been trained, educated, and continue to be trained and educated to face those challenges, but we attract the best experts from the world. We have the best bankers, the best lawyers, the best journalists, TV presenters. I mean, this is truly a magnet in the same way that, but on a much smaller scale, it was a magnet in the 60s when I came. Today, it's a magnet to the world to come and share in this miraculous trip.
And the core of the UAE is still the same?
It has to be, because once again, as I said, if we go back to the three founding principles of this federation, the unity, strength in unity, spreading prosperity, helping humanity, and maintaining your soul. Because society would disintegrate. We've seen this happen in many societies around us in the Middle East, where ideology sometimes kidnaps the narrative, extremism, fanaticism, and then it starts breaking down those traditional values that we truly feel important to our national soul, that Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed keeps talking about. You know, the need to respect the other, to respect the elderly, the generosity of spirit that the Emirati society always had, welcoming others, friendship, honesty, and as to be driven by a moral compass. You know, life is not a question of consumerism. Our young generations should not be brought up on the belief that their success and status are linked to how much money they own in the bank or what job they take, but it is linked to their having this moral purpose that allows them to serve others.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Excellency, thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you, Mikhail, to having me on this program.